Dear America, Russia, China, Ukraine, Iran, India. If we can make groups that are groupings on the same plan for the whole species body, groupings tactical, territory groupings that have been. None of those groupings had tribe. Everyone came out through campuses. We have roles with predicate acts with facts, self value. We have other communicate for you as means to be answers for what was smart or wise. The difference between that. And then the breach method show everyone they need to hide that too. And behind through that. And or it sustained roles with that, which is what American history is really about. See, but people have been using the knowledge of good and evil to use a part of the Old Testament outside of the part it said only to defend. For example, the beginning of the Old Testament per science. See, this is also per the science of pantheism. Have pantheism was more probably and demonstrably about a science about the identity of the hyper simultaneous, a distinct identity, hyper invisible but still discernible, conjunction to all parts of all things, even if made up, therefore to all parts of English grammar, a specific, distinct way from and as what they all parts of them of English grammar are about, down to the slightest detail. It is 1/3/5 identities of possession, simultaneously greater than, more finite than, and as the value of its a special difference here, and relative to it's a special difference relative to its complete identity relationship to itself, which we could be systems other than, where it's positive unto itself, but that not as death, but as value transfer, as humanity's value is force space nature transfer. Nature itself teaches us the difference between being grouped and coupled, triple, the way as its species body, as its own body, as we're systems other, it shows there's criminal foreign influences. There are criminal foreign influences, self-value only known, suits and ties, counters and exceptions are missing. This exception, this game had things. This is why when everyone grew up, everything. In other words, if you try to describe it, they also faked what happened, what they did in other instances, and then they do it real in the instances, and they're lying about who's a liar, who truth. This is a breaching method that has criminal insidiousness natures of positive treatments like truths or facts, collusions, as truths used for lies, truths used to screen motivations, and with questions, and and assuming there's not guilt on the parts of the even the branches of government and intelligence tied to them. The difference between that overt criminal enterprises, private ones at the same time, terrorists and criminal enterprises, all sides of in at news locations. The difference of that public television, at and where those people live, their neighbors. This is a breaching method that use databases and identities of relativity slash relativities, plural, where it's set up the plural part to hide the singular, the hypersingular breaching method. That is a scientific value as one of the things true always that slavery was about. And to discern the breaching method, we have to look about what slavery was about and what witch trials are about simultaneously, because we know where they were simultaneously. They were simultaneous. And we have to gather the things we learned at school in notes and in books, and the difference between that. because they are changing it in our face and we are being tortured, extorted. In fact, human nature enslaved. If we say anything about it, they're building upon others having been shown needs to do this. How it's gotten away with also showed them needs to self value, how overt criminal enterprises per themselves, private ones per themselves, simultaneously pretending other too, and being and having been used remotely with that difference as collusion slash us with all sides of criminal and civil cases and the courts themselves, the difference between that originally and still. See, that's still active and has been. And the breaching method, that's how it shows the countries, locations, areas, and states of active nature. That it made only capable of being and forced to be simultaneously all fact human nature responses and defenses of all natures of postures of the law and its identities. And then further just hyper additionally how as ground locations names and increasingly hyper relatively relatively with relativity to how we are been systems tactical ulterior from how the identity of all space slash existence shows us that the other species bodies in our own we didn't invent certain things about this. That is how part of one of the ways simultaneously that it shows its own. And that this is also simultaneous with what slavery and what witch trials are about simultaneously, no matter who made them up, what extent they were made up. We know those laws were entrenched. There were laws entrenched against that, and it was northern colonies, southern colonies, and then America's founders were born. And we know we would have been able to calmly defend or vigorously defend. But we are prevented either from speaking calmly about or sanely about our founders and what led up to the excuses that you've been told wrongly, but in such a way and with such reliances upon it that even where it's correct, the experts on each of the sciences are colluding, including of history. They have roles self out being used by others because not just either there, the difference between there or at other locations, or at all sides of criminal and civil cases, or relative to and as roles, needs, and natures called on like as functions in a program or intercities relative to predicate acts with facts stacked into databases, relative to hyper invisible but still discernible predicate acts, plural, being and having been generated. I'm not even a lawyer, by a human fact, human nature preaching a predicate acts delivery system method, hyper additional from being a human fact, human nature breaching method. Judge Napolitano, I don't even know him, he would agree. If he disagrees, there were his logic and reason in nature would come with demonstrations of the same thing, and he would then change his mind. But see, people can't afford that quality of discernment and appreciation of what nature itself communicates. People can't afford free speech offensively. And then as styles needing to self-evaluate being and having been replaced and faked. Also, that's important because how they jump in Facebook too, with readings of statutes, the breaching of a certain type of victim / hyper victim said no one else is going to do it. So someone's got to speak about crimes and things like that, and prosecute people. But then this became jobs, and they left out originally and still the difference of their collusions there, or overt criminal enterprises, or private ones, or with the breaching method itself, and with the difference of that, or the intelligence tied to them, and they never had anything but individually grouped and together. Intelligence, foreign and domestic, they never had possessions of their names. He sensitized counters, exceptions, and thinking and speaking together where they fight and not when they're agreeing to think in ways that, like, exactly the way the breaching method employed them to speak for a difference, to use humanity's name. I play no game. This is why nature itself shows us we're not supposed to have the same languages, or we are. To an extent, we're supposed to be. But there's supposed to be exceptions. There are proofs that English was used by ancient people as a grouped language before the sciences became criminally foreign influenced. Not fathoming that and how, for example, theoretically and scientifically, it is more probable and practical in many ways to convict, to theorize, let alone to convict, when they make convictions with history, for example. Through time, tactical ulterior from what could be defended and could afford to be, let alone to protract short words with convictions proper regarding the predicate acts with facts method and the criminal insidiousness delivery system method and the human fact cheating nature breaching method. All those things, it was true always that slavery was, let alone slavery, witch trials, and those laws that sensed through everyone else. If they didn't tell on people for certain type of things that had to be only spoken about in internationally monitored conversations involved the torture, extortion, and slavery method, entrenched and having been sustained in America since before America's founders were born, and since before, and a method perfected, and since before their parents were born, just having been sustained too, and perfected though, but since before modern religious messengers were born. This is more probable and practical to convey. But where they fight, people are going to jump into the fight too, because everyone sees the fight is fake. See, we have the experts, like on Judge Napolitano. I put a link to one of his live streams, So I think it's to his page, but look in the live stream section, and we can jump in with a video to fix the world. I'll donate it to countries A through Z. And nature itself is showing us, please, Iran. And we should put forever bonds with Iran. And make them, not have security other ways and way better, and have evolution's fruits, gifts, means out of nowhere. It's these suits and ties, counters and exceptions that left that up because you guys are being tortured, extorted, enslaved by a name that's not A through Z, even if it's no longer present. This conditioned and maintained all postures of, all natures of uses of the names of the sciences and the people of the sciences from off those locations, then through hyper additional things. But then everyone's self-values leaving out what was with every part of everything. Everything has styles, tactical ulterior from the identity of all space / existence, how it communicates with us. That which we can discern. We don't have to agree to call it Allah. But we need to call it, everyone needs to call it a scientific value. Otherwise they have to deny that they can discern, for example, why and how we are distinct from the other species' bodies, but we are non-distinct from them. And we are simultaneously with them, but also per that which is not them nor us, which has qualities, aspects, and nature of both them and us the same, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously, but also as that distinct further identity of simultaneous nature per science. Even if it's a relativity in this. But what it is that's what it is. Its identity to an extent we can discern. It comes with its complete identity of relationships to itself, and the only increasing value of that with every subject. But this is with and as systems tactically ulterior from that which nature itself employed as the differences between A through Z. What is not debatable is gotten away with as debatable. In other words, per method, the employed use /s conscious of the remotely defenses. This breaching method had other things, ourselves blamed for what it caused. So there are experts that speak on each other, but then then if you tell them, okay, they're also here involved with predicate acts together, of those, and delusions, like blaming other things, others, ourselves, for things our founders told us to blame not on foreign, but on the breaching method itself. So there's a difference between, that's why we nature itself. I'm not even a lawyer. Nature itself shows us we can all agree at countries A through Z to blame a hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise. And we can agree, and nature shows us means to agree on negative things that we all have to counter no matter what. See, but people are having with the negotiations where natures of militaries and things like that, natures of industries, things like that, the difference of that, service people, this, in the background, like I say, it's concentrated as medical corruption, and people tied to databases with it, and all sides of criminal and civil cases, originally and still. That's one of the reasons why that hasn't been addressed. How that's one of the things that witch trials are about. Even no matter who made it up or what, it was one of the things. All those things that were in time were to measure and maintain from abroad, through others, through abroad too, and to measure and maintain itself increasingly by being demonstrated to by the entire species body by nature. For example, but right where it's like a value as a human fact, human nature, breaching method. It's blame other things, others ourselves are forced to be blamed, even though it was that our founders tried to communicate this. See, there are uses of what they said, leaving out what they communicated, because there are styles of fact human nature as overt criminal enterprises, private ones for themselves, and the branch of government intelligence, where they can make convictions by the law, readings of statutes and precedents, and that is of what is simultaneously relative / hyper relative, also with theories in place of relativity. Also with having black pupils and whites of eyes as relativity / hyper relativity. And such theories rolls with how the breaching method knew that nature itself would demonstrate a breaching method caused and is keeping negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures, and criminal and citizens' natures of positive sides, and collusion screening a hyper foreign name rolls also with foreign. Because there's a hyper archaeological trail and demonstration of this, but it also shows all sides of criminal and civil cases. Even when they have the right outcomes, they also have everything's being used to hide other names, roles with all kinds of things, and made styles that are incapable of affording the finite details, or the order of the finite, or the difference of it, let alone the ways we know, and then further hyper simultaneously, the ways those parts of time, forever nature's body that we don't know. It has except for the way we could. It shows us that we could learn more about by appreciating simultaneously. For example, those parts of time, like the past, that you know is true always, relative to the discernment of its body. Now, not through, oh, well, I'm this expert on this nature. No, suits and ties, counters, and exception. Yeah, the suburbs were designed before America's founders were born. Relative to this, simultaneously / hyper simultaneously, as of other things, others ourselves, blame for predicate acts with facts, delivery system method / s that little kids and adults and millions of us, billions of us, trillions of us, humanity. See, everyone has people jump in their conversations because of the identities of difference, including between types of industries, economic. I mean, the value of it, wealth, or even having money or not. In other words, being homeless or not. In fact, some ways especially not, but some ways especially homeless. Especially in this, and when we pay attention to what's actually being and haven't been recorded, and relative to the descriptions of it as it actually relative. Voice for sciences, because the sciences share an identity. Boxing, martial arts, and wrestling are grouped by nature itself, showing us its identity. It's the one that has the other species body with two eyes. Fish with two eyes. We didn't invent that, and the fish didn't invent that. And how? Also, the kangaroo has two eyes. Also, the pelican. Also, what I'm saying. The ostrich, the partridge, people. In other words, we can make a YouTube video with a whole plan. You could, if countries will do it. Each country makes like a male and female version of themselves, and all of them are being extorted, and everyone's trying to cover it up. But missing how there's another name besides the ones that realize are involved as the country's A. We could, in other words, there even peaceful energy creation makes silences and makes roles behind the suits and ties, behind some of their excuses. Where those excuses are used where they're not supposed to be used, relative to the black people's whites of eyes, hyperscope, so to speak, left out and replaced. Where is an answer? Simultaneously, where the breaching method was an answer and is an answer. And simultaneously, with both answers, emphatically have it with people as overt criminal enterprises, private one terrorists, and our own campuses' names. Collusion / S timed with foreign and domestic intelligence, too. They are used remotely as standing criminal insidious nature, hyper criminal insidious nature. They will confess this relative to the black pupils. The whites of eye simultaneously with the breaching method. Appreciation of the hyper evidential, this new nature of evidence. I should have put the title of this video being YouTuber reveals a new nature of evidence. But nature itself, this is also how the relative to how the phenomenon is. I'm not going to speak about until it's more properly designed. Prepare your mind. In other words, for what is it called? Alphabet decipher. My song is coming out it said 1 or 2 days, and that was like a day ago. Two, by the way. There is always sun in California by Anthony Wall. If anyone hears that song, I think it's good. I think it should be on the radio. Someone who works for radio, someone please hear this song. There is always sun in California, etc. Okay, people, thank you. No, what was I saying? Oh my God, I forgot. It's such a serious thing. See, people that have serious, they want to have debates about serious or about what's adult or what's kid. And this is like they can't afford the nature of a debate without, on paper right there, accurate. They need to go before courts with the difference between that or the overt criminal enterprise at the same time. The difference between that too. With witch trials and still, that's also relative to why. If you start explaining what that's about, it starts showing predicate acts methods. Because this hyper-additionally too, that's one of the things that nature itself, I'm not even a lawyer. One of the things true, I'm not a police form. One of the things true always. It's predicate acts with facts method. I'm not a criminal. Nature itself shows us the identity that the sciences share. English values the predicate to discern the hyper invisible but still discernible identity of the hyper invisible. This is what the discerning, we are appreciating what we appreciate. The conjunction between the main verb as a predicate and a subject or subjects. In other words, we are appreciating the identity of the hyperrelativity, of hyperrelativity's identity of relationship to itself, to the extent we can discern, and the increasing value of that. As a third way is hyper invisible, three parts of itself equally increasing. Identity of possession, of hyperpossession, over and as every finite detail in the order of the finite, distinctly from it, but also non-distinctly, and simultaneously / hyper simultaneously, where and how more and more identity of its identity of forever nature is being made. Here where Earth has a special difference too. And so we can be systems tactical ulterior from its own, but that it shows us that's a negative identity of relationship to itself and to a special difference here. And that is forced from here. Leith of Hades. See, heaven and hell, there are more probably. These are words as values / value nature that came with the science of pantheism. More so about Earth's a special difference and our own a special difference than about the planets in space or pace. So, in other words, vaccines, I teach those things, but long. Come on.